So, I was thinking of covering the absolute mess that happened, the fact that Dominic Raab resigned, the four other ministers resigned, leaving, I think, Theresa May and I think 5 other cabinet members that haven't resigned. It's getting pretty quiet in that cabinet. But we once again turn to the Financial Times. Because once again, as I've said, the Financial Times has been one of those papers that has consistently given good and accurate reporting of what's going on in these negotiations and laying it out in clear black and white what the consequences of this are going to be. So this came out on the 14th. So obviously, as of yet, Raab hadn't resigned. There hadn't been the... we know that there have been letters passed to the 1922 committee. As of yet, we don't know what's going to happen. So bear in mind, I'm doing this on Friday morning at 9:10. So by the time this goes out, who knows? Maybe Theresa May might no longer be Prime Minister. She might be fighting a leadership battle. We don't know. That's just the fun of politics. So, 2.5 years after the UK's fateful decision to leave the EU, Theresa May has struck an agreement on the terms of departure. The economic costs are plain to see. The painful compromises all too apparent. Advocates of the deal argue that the Prime Minister is respecting the outcome of the referendum, but this is hardly cause for celebration. The draft deal shatters the illusions about Brexit. The idea of a clean, quick break from the EU, the notion of a new trade deal with the EU would be simple and achievable by the end of 2019. The Panglossian view that there would be nothing but good in a new, albeit undefined relationship. Unwinding 4 decades of economic, trading and legal ties was never going to be straightforward. The UK had a weak negotiating hand, and the May government has played it poorly. It was irresponsible to announce prematurely that the UK had no interest in maintaining membership of the single market and the customs union, given the importance for businesses, jobs and economic growth. Contrary to the May's government's hopes of playing divide and rule in the Brexit negotiations, the EU27 stuck together. Ireland was not abandoned, and Brussels negotiators, led by Michel Barnier, brushed aside British attempts at cherry-picking the benefits of membership. Compared to remaining in the EU, there is no doubt that Mrs May's deal is manifestly inferior. It moves the UK away from its most important trading partner, while giving it less say over the rules that govern its economy. The UK has swallowed a lot of thin gruel, but on balance, it is probably the best deal available given the Prime Minister's self-imposed red lines. The outline of the agreement has been clear for some time. A 400 billion to 45 billion divorce settlement, a 20-month standstill transition period that could be extended, broad but non-binding commitments on the future relationship, plus a backstop for the Irish border that will potentially keep the UK in the customs union for years. The backstop is problematic and may prove too much for some unionist MPs. There is little enthusiasm for May's deal, but talk of betrayal by some Brexiteers is nonsense. The real betrayal is by those who promoted falsehoods during the referendum, such as the prospect of Turkey joining the bloc and an immediate windfall of savings on the EU budget. Yet Britain and its politicians remain profoundly divided. Divisions over Europe have been building up for decades and were exposed during the referendum. No deal can resolve these tensions. For businesses, the tentative Brexit deal pushes back uncertainty, but it does not eliminate it. If a deal passes Parliament, there may be a brief uptick in investor confidence, but there is little long-term detail. Brexiteers and Remainers are correct to argue that the UK's future relationship with the EU is in limbo. Clarity is unlikely to arrive until the middle of the next decade. Businesses might be able to plan until the end of 2020, but another cliff edge looms. The critical issue is now whether Mrs May's deal will be accepted by MPs. It faces a broad coalition lining up to reject it, from hardline Brexiteers such as Boris Johnson to concerned Remainers, including his brother Joe Johnson. MPs must carefully examine the withdrawal deal, running more than 400 pages, along with loose commitments on the future relationship. Ultimately, they will have to consider what course is in the national interest. Not only Britain's economic future, but also its international reputation and political stability. And that is where we are at the moment. We are at a point where Mrs. May, she was never, and let's be frank, the line that the Brexiteers are selling, that this is somehow a betrayal, is complete false. Because what Mrs. May is trying to do is she's trying to deliver the best possible hard Brexit. There is no way that any of these Brexiteers, like Mog, or if Boris Johnson was in charge, they could deliver something that was better. The idea that when Rab resigned, saying that, oh, there's something better than this in the murky, in the fantasy world of Brexit, doesn't exist. Because as is stated there, Europe is our most important trading partner. You cannot replicate that relationship with anyone else. Not Australia, not New Zealand, and not America. The EU is just far too important to us and our economy, and not having a say on the rules that go on in that economy is going to damage and affect us for decades if we are not a part of it. So if you are a Remainer, do not align yourself with Brexiteers who say that this is a bad deal. Yes, of course this is a bad deal, but here's the thing. This deal, as said in this article we've just gone through, it completely shatters the illusion of Brexit. The idea that we are going to get something good from leaving the EU, or even better, is not. That deal is the best deal Brexiteers can even hope to dream of, what Mrs. May has delivered. Now, it should be absolutely rejected completely, because as far as I'm concerned, in Mrs. May's speech where she said there should be no Brexit, well, bring it on, Theresa, no Brexit at all, because we have been through 2 years only to prove that the best deal the UK can get is being a member of the European Union. And if anyone out there is even remotely arguing that somehow that what Mrs. May has delivered is a good deal, it's not, it's awful. And if there is Brexiteers out there who are going, oh no, we can get an even better deal, they're living in a complete fantasy world. That's the fantasy that has been delivered upon. And it is shattered every single turn during these Brexit negotiations. The idea that, again, delivering on some sort of this imperialistic, glorious past that we had would somehow come rushing back to return to us is not going to happen.